let's get started. I was hoping to be able to show you briefly what I've still got running on my other Mac Mini at home, but the internet is not cooperating with me. Well, more to the point, the church Wi-Fi is not cooperating with me, so I can't actually get a reliable connection. Do I see a hand up there somewhere? No. Right. So what I've got now is I've managed to get my laptop behaving itself. So I'm now running the older operating system again, Mojave. So this is my normal system. And just while I've got it here, I'll just show you briefly that error message which I was talking about before. If I try and run the Mojave installer, the old copy, it does that. So that's the error message you get now. The details, the text after the words install macOS vary depending on what your application's called, but I've just renamed mine so I know which one it was, that's all. So that's it, it won't let you do anything else. And if I try and open one of my software updates that I've downloaded, such as that one, don't need to verify it, I know it's okay. And I open that, so that's a previously downloaded software update from Apple, manual install version of the combo update. I can't skip that one, unfortunately. I insist on verifying it. And I think that's internet dependent as well, so it's a bit sluggish. While I'm waiting for that to load, one of the annoyances of the fact that Catalina has been released, anybody still running Mojave will notice they've now got a persistent software update sitting there waiting to be dealt with. System preferences says one update next to it. The dock icon has a 1 badge on it, and if I actually run it, ignoring the fact that that thing is not going to let me do anything else, and you go into software update, it's got checks for updates. This might take a wee while. It's got a prominent entry there for Catalina available and ready to install. There we go. It's finally loaded that. That's what happens if you try and load a package installer now from Apple. It tells you it's expired. Do you want to continue anyway? So that will actually work. So I can actually use those. It's just the full installer applications that are broken. So that's okay. So I can cope with that. So I've got like several hundred of those to deal with. But this one, the software update in Mojave, is extremely irritating. I have found instructions on how to hide the Catalina update on Mojave inside software update and system preferences, but the easy part of it just gets rid of the banner which appears in system preferences. It does not get rid of the badge on the icon saying there is one update available. So you constantly think there's a software update waiting for you to go and deal with, and in fact it's just the fact that Catalina is available. So there is no way until I upgrade to Catalina to get rid of that number 1 there, other than running a rather messy hack which requires doing a setting and quitting and relaunching the dock repeatedly. There you go, that's what it looks like now that Catalina is available. So it's telling me that there is a 8 GB software update ready and waiting. I'm a bit curious about the fact that it's 8 GB. If I let App Store load, if you have any other software updates pending in Mojave, it tells you down below, oh, by the way, you've got more things. Won't tell you what they are. You click on a link there and it will take you to a page which tells you what other updates you've actually got. But I haven't dared click update all because I don't know whether it's going to go and upgrade to Catalina in the process. So it's irritating. And Apple has not...
It won't say you've got 2 updates if you've got...
No, it just says more updates available.
No, but I mean in the thing down below at the bottom.
There, like that. That's a screenshot that somebody took of it. It's showing other updates are available with the more info button. You click the more info button and it gives you a window listing all the other updates, which includes things like Safari and security updates.
So it's still just showing you 1 at the bottom of the screen, isn't it? Instead of 2 or 3.
Well, it usually showed you at least 1 at the top, but now that 1 is Catalina and there's no way to get rid of it apart from there's a command line thing to hide it.
What I'm trying to extract from you is whether you will either see 2 or 3 in that little bar
Not in there, no. You always had to click more info to see more than one pending update. But now the fact that there is Catalina available means you can't see any normal updates unless you go and click on that more info button.
So when are you recommending Catalina?
I'm not. I'm definitely not. If you've read my article,
I did, but yeah, I installed it.
oh, well, it's not going to change in one day. I wrote the article yesterday, so I finished writing it yesterday. Yes, if those who haven't seen the Capital Apple yet, I have this nice big pretty pink banner, which I decided was the colour which would stand out and still be legible. We're basically saying, do not install this if you value your computer, basically, is my current opinion. I expect that this is an extremely rare problem. It's been mentioned, a few people mentioned it happening in late betas of Catalina, and a few other people said that happened on the release version in discussion groups like on Apple's online discussions. And this happened to come to my attention only because one of the news websites I read published an article about it on Thursday. That's the first I'd heard of it. So I'm not aware of this being a widespread problem. If it was major news, it would have been screamed across the headlines of every website I read. So it may in fact be so rare that it only affects like one in maybe 100,000 Macs, that sort of order of magnitude. But you never know whether it's going to be your one. And my recommendation is, just because of that risk of that problem, especially if you have an older Mac that's too old to get serviced, do not risk it until we know more. And I won't know more until probably sometime in the next week or so. Hopefully there'll be more news about it. Or Apple releases 10.15.1, which may mention in its release notes some vaguely worded thing saying something about fixes installation problems or something like that. But at the moment the risk is if you upgrade to Catalina and your Mac happens to be affected by this, your Mac will become unusable for any purpose at all unless you take it into servicing, and the only way they can service it is to replace the motherboard. And replacing the motherboard is not possible if your Mac is a 2013 or older model anymore. So older models are an issue. John?
David, do you think this organisation tends to be top down? Apple tells us what's going on. Do you think we have a fund of telling Apple, giving this information back to Apple?
Well, we don't. Apple doesn't pay attention to normal users, and user groups are normal users as far as they're concerned. The only mechanism we've got is to send Apple feedback. This sort of thing has not affected enough people that it may not have come to Apple's attention, even though it's being discussed on Apple's online discussion forums. Apple does not read those forums. That's not the purpose of them. Those things are there for Apple users to support each other. So now that it's come to the attention of at least one of the news sites, I'm hoping that the others will publish articles about it, and enough will come to Apple's attention that they may actually do something to at least say something about it. But until that happens, I'm not going to know whether this has actually been fixed or not.
Is it worth putting on the Apple support thing where you can click on your computer, type that you've got, and write a message to you, and tell them what version you've got and what the problem is?
Well, unless you actually encounter... No.
One of the 100,000 button on with that.
No. Well, the problem is that unless you actually have this problem, Apple's not going to know. You can't complain about a problem that you haven't encountered yet. So that's the difficulty. The problem is if you encounter this problem, your computer is dead. So this is sort of the worst case scenario. There's no way to actually say, I've just had this problem without risking your computer dying. I was already delaying upgrading to Catalina on my main computer because I've got a few things I just haven't quite dealt with yet. But this is enough of a reason that because this machine is too old now to get serviced at all, if it suffered that problem, this computer would be totally dead. There's no way for me to get it fixed anymore. So I cannot risk upgrading this machine to Catalina until I know that problem's fixed, or at least have enough information that I can judge whether or not I'm going to be affected by it. But I have done a clone of that computer and upgraded it on this computer, which is a 2018 Mac Mini. So if the problem had affected that computer, that one is new enough that it can still get serviced. It might cost me $1,000, but I can at least get the computer working again. Now, if it turns out, as it's very likely, that this is actually a software problem that Apple have caused, which is causing computers to die, Apple should be fixing it and reimbursing people for the cost of getting it fixed. and if necessary replacing computers that they can't service anymore. So potentially this is going to cost Apple a lot of money if there are enough computers affected by it. So, well, they won't. Apple probably doesn't even know about it yet. This is the problem. It's only just been appeared like 3 days ago on one of the news sites that I read. It's been mentioned for 3 weeks or so on some of the discussion forums and things like that, but I haven't seen it widespread. I've only just found out about myself, so at the moment I'm just saying, whoa, no need to rush into this anyway, but really, really don't rush into it because of that problem. The other one, this is the reason I wasn't upgrading already. The one about mail permanently losing messages. Apple have changed the way that mail works in Catalina. Up till now, if you're running, if there was a distinction between how mail handled IMAP accounts on iOS devices and on Macs. On Macs, it downloaded everything. You got all your email downloaded to the computer, so you had a full copy of it. On iOS devices, it only downloaded header information, and then if you read the message, it downloaded the whole thing and cached it. They're changing the Mac version of Mail to behave the same way. So that means that the Mac version is not going to keep a full copy of your email anymore. If it's still on the server, then it can just go and download it again. There's no reason for it to keep it on the computer. There is a bug in this mechanism. Sometimes it doesn't download the content, it only shows the header of the message, and if the message is in that state and you move it somewhere, it loses it completely. It's gone. There is no way to get it back again. And I have enough dependency on email that I'm not willing to risk the integrity of my email to upgrade my main machine to Catalina. I have run mail on my upgraded test machine, but I'm very, very careful what I do with it. I'm just basically looking at it and saying, yep, that looks like it's there, but I'm not going to fiddle with it. So, yeah, I'm because of that reason, even without the risk of the computer dying, I'm not even willing to upgrade it. The other one is this, which irritated me no end, was this temporary problem with the music app, which I use iTunes a lot, and I've been importing CDs onto my iTunes library for decades. I started using iTunes about version 2 or something like that, right back in the late 1990s, early 2000s. And I have 5. Well, I can tell you because I've got iTunes running probably. It's gone and loaded everything in the wrong place. Let's fix that. Back to there again, that's not supposed to be there. Go back to there again, that's not supposed to be there. No, come back. Thank you. That's not supposed to be there. That's not supposed to be there. For goodness sake. Take away all of these windows. iTunes isn't even running now, as I find out. Why is iTunes not running? It's supposed to be. Thank you. Right. So I have, don't need that. What's that? 10,000 songs in my iTunes library. So rather a big collection, and you can see I've gone to the trouble of, if I find the right view, actually getting covers for all my albums. Most of which are imported from CD. So there are a few missing, but for the most part, I've actually gone to the extent of actually going and finding the picture on the internet and loading it into my copy of the music. As soon as I upgraded to Catalina, they were all gone. All the covers were completely disappeared and replaced by a rectangle with a music symbol in it. And it then started downloading all the covers from the internet again. And in the process, Mail's music app's memory usage started climbing and climbing and climbing. And if anybody's seen in Activity Monitor, there's under the memory section, there is a memory pressure graph down here. I have never seen that any colour other than green. It went orange, then it went red, and the computer was getting very slow, and so I quit music and ran it again. A friend of mine left it running, and his computer got to the point where it brought up a message saying, your computer has run out of application memory. Please quit one of these applications, not including the one that was actually causing the problem. So that's a bug which I have seen reports Apple has already fixed in the upcoming 10.15.1 update. So that particular one is one item ticked off my reasons not to upgrade to Catalina. But it's enough of a problem that I'm not happy about. It'll probably still lose all the album covers, but which is going to be an awful lot of work for me to fix again. I had to actually go through a rather complicated technical solution to get them all in there properly, but it's... Yeah, Yeah, but I did it a special way, which avoided having a copy of the album cover in every single track on every single album, which would take vast amounts of disk space. I've actually found a third-party solution which pretended to be the iTunes store, provided you pictures from anywhere else, and then iTunes fetched them from what it thought was the iTunes store, and then did it in the same way that iTunes store does it. But that doesn't work anymore. So, yes.
Saying that not only is it insisting on the placing orders, but then every tune on the thing is associated with it.
No. If you get your album covers from the iTunes store, which is the way that iTunes has built in, it downloads a single copy of the album and all the tracks reference that single copy of the album cover artwork. If you have a collection of files that you have inserted artwork into, each one of those tracks can have its own image attached to it, which makes the MP3 considerably bigger, or the AAC or whatever it is, because it's not just the music, it's now got a picture inside it. And if there is 15 tracks on the album, there's 15 copies of the same picture, which is a silly system. So iTunes has for a long time supported this cached single file mechanism, but Apple's never provided a way to actually let you manage it yourself. The only way you can manage it is have iTunes automatically download the covers for you, and it only works for stuff that Apple's actually got available via the iTunes Music Store. So I had to work around that for quite a few things which I didn't have, weren't available via the iTunes Music Store. I can't remember what they were off the top of my head, but yeah, I have a fairly large number of albums there, including finding the right version of the album cover, because the one I like my CD collection to look like what my CD collection looks like.
That's the thing that covers vary.
Yes. So the cover which Apple's got may be the wrong one. So I had to find something which resembled the right one usually. The other thing they've changed is I like this. This is my normal view of using iTunes when I'm playing music. I prefer to look at the song list with the album cover down the left-hand column. That column no longer exists in the new version of music. So you only get the list of songs. It also lost all my settings, so I lost which columns were visible and all that sort of thing. I had to go and resettle that again. So it lost all my preferences effectively. But that column does not exist. The music software does not support that feature anymore, which is annoying because it's still got that view, which has the individual albums, and I don't like that view. I prefer looking at the songs with more detailed information. And the other thing they got rid of is the column browser, which is the thing that is on the top, which allows you to pick an artist, a genre, if you turn on that feature. I've turned it off because I don't use it, and all of the albums. That gives you a convenient way of just browsing through, for example, only Adele's albums, pick one of them, or that sort of thing. So that whole column browser mechanism is gone in the new version of music. So I'm unhappy about that, but that one I didn't use very often anymore, so I wasn't too worried about it. But the album covers is verging on sacrosanct as far as I'm concerned, so I'm very unhappy about that one. Okay, so still running Mojave here. I just wanted to run Go64 and show you that in a bit more detail here. So here I've got Go64 running with having already updated a few more applications since the first copy we saw running briefly a little bit earlier. So you can see here, for example, that drag thing under the 64-bit column says no, which means that one is completely 32-bit and it will not work. But if I look at Aperture, for example, Aperture has got a triangle there, and the triangle shows down the bottom. App is 64-bit except for whatever component that it's found is not 64-bit. So that means, and Aperture in particular is one that Apple said will not work in Catalina. They did not say the same for iPhoto, but it is tarred by the same feather because Aperture and iPhoto are actually the same application with more features in one than the other in effect. So they're using the same library and everything. So if you're still using iPhoto or you use Aperture, which is its big brother, then that's definitely not going to work anymore in Catalina. iPhoto specifically, which Apple stopped supporting in 2015, early 2015. So that was when they replaced it with the new Photos application. So the new Photos application is fine. It's iPhoto, the older one, which I can still run in Mojave if I need to. I've still got my old library there just for demonstration purposes, but it will not run, won't even open in Catalina. Yeah, so this Go64 thing it's free. They ask for a donation if I quit. About the only advertising it does is it doesn't even show it anymore. I think I told it not to show me again. So if I run it again, go 64. It also remembers the last list that it had and reloads them again, so it's quite quick the second time you run it because it retains the previous history. And I've noticed that while you are running it, if you replace one of your applications, it immediately updates and shows you the revised status, or if you delete an application, it disappears from the list. So it's quite clever about tracking changes as it goes. So it's quite nice just to keep track of, okay, I've still got to deal with all of these ones. A lot of these are, I don't care. It also has a feature where you can choose all executables rather than just applications. This is going to take a wee while to rebuild. I'll just let it get on with that. Which includes not just applications, but other things that are also executable software. Examples are things like system preference panes. If I go into system preferences, you can have third-party add-on things that go down the bottom of system preferences, and this particular one happens to be a 32-bit one. In Mojave, if I run that, you get this message. To use this preference pane, system preferences must quit and reopen. And what it's actually having to do is rerun itself in 32-bit mode just to run that plugin. So that particular plugin is one that will not run in Catalina. So that feature has gone as well. But most of my others are already 64-bit, so it's only that one, I think. So there it is there, diablotin.pref pane, however you pronounce it. So that particular one is a preference pane. If I sort these by kind, you can see apart from applications, there's another one there, MySQL preference pane, which I don't think I've used recently, so that's just an old one. A whole bunch of command line utilities. Now these are actually Apple supplied ones, some of which have actually got a 32 on the end of the name, so they're deliberately the 32-bit version, which they're still keeping in case you need it, the sort of utilities for developers, that sort of thing. But some of them are just ones that Apple hasn't yet updated to 64-bit in Mojave because they didn't need to. So I'm not too worried about most of those. But there are a few, and I've got, for example, I've got a command line tool for doing RAR archive files, and that one is a 32-bit one, so that one wouldn't work anymore. So it's useful just to be able to find a few other things apart from applications. For the most part, it's the application list which matters. And it also searches places which are not inside your applications folder, so it looks over the whole computer. One thing that I have found useful is it's got a preferences thing. You can tell it to ignore certain folders, and I've told it to ignore the operating system, because anything that Apple's left behind 32-bit in the operating system shows up in here as well. I don't care about it because Apple will deal with it. It's not my problem. So I've actually added system as an exclusion to my copy, so it cuts down the amount of noise in my list. If I take that out again, just so you can see, and then I do a rescan, it'll take a wee while, but you'll get an idea of how many more things there were. I'll let that keep going. So any questions so far? So that we're just basically looking at, okay, things you're going to have to do. Even though I'm saying at the moment, don't upgrade to Catalina yet, I'm not saying never upgrade to Catalina. At some point it will get better. At the moment it's not very good. But as a result, I'm still recommending people get prepared for either upgrading to Catalina now or in future, or eventually needing to buy a new Mac, because if you buy a new Mac, it will come with Catalina or later and won't run any old software. So preparing for the demise of your 32-bit software is a good plan. Margaret?
Yes, so most of these things that are not apps are to do with Apple, and they'll be updated by Apple.
Yeah, you may have something obscure in there. So that the applications.
If you're looking at all these,
Well, that's the thing. This gives you a lot more information. Like, for example, now that I've got the whole operating system there, it's showing me.
updated by Mac.
It's showing things like the QuickTime framework, which is part of the operating system. So that sort of stuff is either gone in Catalina or has been updated. So QuickTime is one that's gone. Carbon sound, anything to do with carbon will have gone. So those sorts of things will either have been updated or will be completely gone. So I think paying a lot of attention to the non-applications is of limited use, because it's there if you need it, and there may be something obscure on there. The difficulty is identifying it. When you click on these, it tells you where they're located, but unless you're familiar with how Apple has organised parts of the operating system, it's not going to mean a lot to most people. So I'd say concentrate on the applications, so leave that set to applications rather than all executables. But even if you do that, there are some parts of the operating system that will show up. I'm trying to think of an example. It doesn't show paths here, unfortunately, so it's difficult for me to tell.
Should you be able to move your stuff, as it were, into a new computer running Catalina? Is one way of updating.
Well, yeah. Given that you've already got a Mac that runs the software, one approach is don't bother upgrading to Catalina on your current computer. When you buy a new computer, only move across the stuff that's going to work. Yeah. So that's a reasonably good approach for most people. And
Usually there's a kind of a thing where you just join the two things together and let them get on with it.
yeah, the migration mechanism. Yeah.
Rather than having to select. So will Apple sort out that migration?
No, because the migration will set up equivalent mechanism which copies, or do you want to transfer all your data from another Mac or backup disk or words to that effect. That has an option for whether or not to copy applications. If you say no, none of your applications are copied. If you say yes, all of your applications are copied.
So you get a line through them if they don't work anymore.
Yes, you can delete them. You can go through and clean them up afterwards. So that's my usual approach. I've actually the operating system I'm running on here has been through at least 5 computers and 13 operating system versions by migrating or upgrading over the time I've had it. So I started out with this on a PowerBook G4 running macOS 10.2, and then I upgraded later on to a MacBook Pro running about 10.5, and then another MacBook Pro running about 10.6, about 3 years later because the timeline was slower then, and then this one which I got with 10.9. So I've been through and I've upgraded and upgraded and upgraded, so I've got a lot of old baggage hovering around, some of which I haven't used for a long time. So, but I have generally been upgrading most of the applications that I use on a regular basis. So if a new version of FileMaker Pro, for example, came out, I'd go and buy it, even though it cost me several $100s. And that's been necessary because often they're broken by a new operating system version. And if an application gets abandoned, like Bento, for example, is one that I know that Peter's using, for example, a database which I thought was going somewhere, and then FileMaker decided they didn't want to support it anymore, so they decided just to drop it. That was one I thought was getting somewhere, and it gave up. I bought all 4 versions of it, and then I've given up on that one. I've deleted it. It's not even on my computer anymore, but it's on my... I've got it on a virtual machine running the last operating system version that it officially worked on, which is 10.9. Anything after that, and it's in a grey area where it may not work properly. Peter.
Where does this Go 64 come from?
I've mentioned that in several times now in articles and things. St. Clair Software is the company who sell it, or don't sell it. It's free, and I've got the web page open at the moment, so I'll just show you the page. Not that one. There it is. There. So stclairsoft.com. They are. That's the web page, and this particular one, they ask for donations. If you think it's useful to you, you might want to give them some money. Just say thank you. This was helpful. I will be at some point. I just haven't done it yet. But they also make other software you're more likely to have heard of. If I go to their products page, one that's been quite popular amongst Mac users for a long time is a thing called Default Folder 10, which modifies the standard open and save file dialog boxes by giving you a whole bunch of extra features. I never bothered running it because I didn't want to get used to it, and as I'm often dealing with other people's computers, so I haven't actually used it much, but I actually own a copy of it. It came as a part of a software bundle. The other stuff I haven't even looked at, so I have no idea what Aptainment is like. Jettison helps you eject drives. History Hound, I don't know that one either, but Default Folder 10 is one that I know of is quite popular amongst Mac users anyway. So they are a well-regarded software developer, and it's not anything dodgy is the main piece of information there. Yep. So stclairsoft.com, Go64 from the main page, and then and the nice thing about this is it runs on older operating systems back as far as the El Capitan 10.11, so you can plan well ahead. Even if you want to upgrade to Mojave, 32-bit applications on Mojave are a bit annoying because they complain every month if you telling you this software is not optimized for your Mac, which is Apple's weasel words for this will need to be upgraded to a new version if you want it to run on the next operating system. So yes, that's like that. Microsoft Word is not updated for your Mac. That's one I haven't. That's one I avoided buying. I've bought second-hand copies of Microsoft Office because I don't use it regularly, and I've now given up on it completely. So I do not have a working copy of Office on this machine anymore. I refuse to subscribe to Microsoft's online thing or pay hundreds of dollars for something which I use maybe once a year. So I'll just deal with it somehow. Deal with the lack of it.
We were given an $80 workaround that senior need if anyone's interested.
Mm.
Some companies have got obviously bought a whole lot of
Ah.
licenses in bulk, and they're selling them off one at a time for $50 USA. And I've got the link here, and apparently it's working. I said I guess the acid test will be when you do your first, when you get your first update.
Well, the updates aren't the problem. It's the activation. With every Office 2000, yeah, Office 2011 and later require activation. If they're selling off enterprise license copies, that may have a different mechanism, and that's a complete violation of the license agreement.
Well,
So
it probably is, but so who's breaking the law? The purchaser?
the person who sold it is definitely violating the license agreement with Microsoft. The purchaser is not eligible to agree to the license agreement, so they're also not allowed to use it.
I thought it sounded dodgy, but apparently it works.
Yeah, so the copies I bought are actual box retail ones, which of Office 2008 and 11 on Trade Me or something like that, which somebody was selling. It's not my problem if they've cloned it and still running the license key. I've got the physical disk, I've got the license key tag and everything like that. So I definitely know that's a legitimate copy. Yep. The silly thing is nowadays, if you buy the retail copy of Office, it comes either as a emailed license key and a download link, or a piece of cardboard with a scratch panel on it with the license key underneath it. Yeah. So then you still have to download it, so they don't give you a physical disk anymore or anything you can actually work with. So yeah. So anyway, I think that's all I can really do at the moment on Mojave. So it's probably best if I switch back to the Catalina system again, so we can actually have a look at it. So before I leave that, is there anything else anybody can think of that's sort of pre-Catalina questions? Otherwise we'll go on to actually look at Catalina.
Just with your Office,
Yes.
if you did it in Pages and then just save it as an Office.
Well, that's fine if I want to give somebody a reasonably simple document. If somebody sends me an Office document, they want me to edit and send back to them, I do not want to convert it from format A to format B to format and it stuffs it up. The best option I've got at the moment, I can still run Office on the iPad as long as I use a 9.7-inch or smaller iPad. At 10.0 or greater, they insist on you paying for it. Bloody annoying, because now I've got a 10.5-inch iPad Air and a 12.9-inch iPad. Apple seems to be conspiring with them to cut that off, but I've still got two working iPads at 9.7 and one iPad Mini.
Can you use the online version, or doesn't it have the editing facilities?
Online version?
There's an online version of Word.
Office? No, there isn't. There is a subscription to Office 365, which may include an online version, but you can't use it unless you subscribe to it.
Oh, no, these ones you don't need to, it's just out there. It's in Google. You can use it on.
Well, Google's got Google Docs, which is a different piece of software.
It does have Microsoft Word, but it may not have.
No, it has the ability to import and export Microsoft Word documents. Same problem. If you try and use Pages, Google Docs, or LibreOffice or something like that, all of them have to do a conversion step, which may mangle things, and another conversion step to go back again, which may mangle things again. However, having said that, even using two different versions of Microsoft Office can mangle things. Or the same version of Microsoft Office can mangle things if you don't have the right fonts or something like that. So it's, I have a major aversion to Microsoft Office being a document standard because it isn't. Right, I'm going to go over to the Catalina machine now. So now I know where the hole is, I'll just plug that in. Right. Let's let this one wake up. Yeah, it's still not unlocking with my Apple Watch, it should be. No, let's try it again. No, I haven't had caps lock yet. now I've got to get the iPad again so I can see without craning my neck around. Pro. Right, so Sidecar is at least working well enough that I can usually, yeah, it's going good, that I can actually see what's going on with that. Of course, this will make more sense in a laptop case. I could actually have the iPad screen, so if I can just show you briefly what this looks like. This is the Sidecar feature. It's easier if I carry this rather than trying to show you. So you can see there the iPad is showing the same screen as what's on there. So I've currently got it set to mirrored mode, but I could have originally had it set to extended desktop mode, so this was a separate screen. So it makes more sense in the usual case to have what's on your normal screen, and if you need more space, you hook up the iPad via Sidecar or some other method and use it as an extra screen
Use
for showing.
apps on that.
You can drag a window across or something like that. So I use an external monitor quite often with my laptop, so that I can do things like put a big spreadsheet on it while I'm working on something else, or have a reference thing on one screen. Similar concept. So it's got icons down the side here for manipulating various modifier keys. So you can do Command, Option, Shift, Control Shift, sorry. I haven't actually worked out what those two do. One of them brings the dock up and down, that one I haven't worked out. That brings a little on-screen keyboard, which you can drag around. So you can just get it out of the way or something. That's like a little iPhone keyboard. I'm assuming that's undo, given the icon. I haven't dared push it, and that one closes the Sidecar connection. But if you're running an application that supports the touch bar, if I find one, if I go into Notes, for example, am I running it? Come on, show me not showing me the Sidecar anymore. Come on, are you working or are you not working? No, it's gone and lost its connection again. Let me do a reconnect, disconnect.
Maybe that's still flaky as well, David.
Yeah, well, this is the first release, so I expect it's not very reliable. So if I run an app which actually supports it, which this one doesn't appear to, no, okay, I've got to find one that does. If I go into Pages or something, I don't want that one. Let's create a new document. Right, so why do I not have the, what's that do? That brings up that one, and what's that do? Touch bar? No, I don't know where it's gone, but when I was testing this yesterday, when I finally got it working, what I had along the bottom of the screen, if you've seen a 2016 or later MacBook Pro, which has the function keys replaced by a little wee on-screen key, Rex, you'll be familiar with that because you've got one of those models. So basically the top right of the keyboard is replaced by a little wee elongated screen with dynamically updating keys. That appears along the bottom of the screen here, but it's not doing it now for some reason that I can't explain. So you can actually access all the shortcuts for the application along the bottom of your iPad screen. Now I'm wondering if it's because I haven't got the pencil hooked up. Let's just try that. If I'm not sure. Is this pencil working right now? No, I'm going to be paired with the other iPad. Let me pair my pencil. First, it takes a wee while for it to recognise it. Because I've now got two iPads that support the same pencil, I randomly hop back and forth which one I'm using. Is this working or not? Close Sidecar for a second. I have to unlock the iPad first, I think. So the user interface experience here is a little bit fiddly in my experience. That's working. Pair, thank you. Now I've got the pencil paired. Good. Now this is one other annoyance with Sidecar. You have to sign into it from the Mac. You can't do it from the iPad. So now I have to come back in here and tell it to reconnect to the iPad. So now that I've done that, that didn't change anything, but I can now use, or can I? Is that actually working? No, it hasn't updated, it's not updating the screen again, so it's intermittently not updating. So reliability is poor, shall we say. Let's try it again. Have we now got mouse moving? Yes, and yay, I can now use my pencil to control the computer. That didn't change anything in terms of the touch bar appearing along the bottom, so I still don't know what triggers that. It's not that. Just wondering, because I had been fit. So that brings the dock up. I know that's the little button on the left-hand side. I've worked that one out, but except now it's not doing it reliably. No, it's just deciding it's going to stay there. Go away. Thank you. So that's supposed to be a shortcut to get you into the dock, I think, or something like that. So I haven't worked out what the other button does. So the idea is that you can use the pencil to control the user interface. So you need to have an Apple Pencil, obviously, to do that. You can't use your finger to tap on anything. So it's sort of like a half. It's not really like an iPad anymore. You have to actually use a pencil, and then I can actually come into something and draw if I had any drawing capability, which is rather primitive. I can find an application that supports it and draw something. So, but I won't bother trying to demonstrate that. But you can use the pencil to touch buttons on the screen. So I can go, for example, tap the Apple menu, go into About This Mac or something like that. So this has a fine enough tip that I can aim at things. The reason Apple's done it this way is they don't want your fingers are too fat to control macOS user interface elements, so you can't aim properly with your finger, but you can with a pencil tip. And the other thing I found is that it will scroll. I can do that. If I go into something like my downloads folder, which is there, I missed downloads, it will scroll if you use two fingers like on a trackpad on a laptop. So I can actually scroll the screen up and down using the iPad using the two-finger gesture. So that's the only thing I can use my fingers for on the screen. So, oh well, that's a feature in progress as far as I can tell. So at the moment it's handy for me just to be able to see what's on the screen behind me. So I'll keep using it for that at least. Have to remember I can't do that. So let's close that, or I can just switch back to the trackpad and keyboard. Okay, so now if I just go quickly through any new features that anybody is particularly interested in seeing. One thing I have, a few of the things I mentioned in my article, one thing you may have seen briefly is the new layout of system preferences. So they now have an Apple ID section along the top. So I've gone to the trouble of creating an emoji for myself, or at least with a sort of a caricature of myself as my photo rather than using a real photo. So I did that on my iPhone when I got the new operating system. So that gives you now access to your Apple ID, which includes all the normal iCloud stuff, plus you can get into a list of all your devices that are linked to your Apple ID, which I have quite a few of. So this is the same sort of information you previously had available on your iPhone or iPad, so now it's easily available on your Mac. You could previously get to it if you went into the iCloud website or the Apple ID or apple.com website, so now it's directly available here. So you can get into your contact information, your password and security, your payment information, all that sort of thing. So it's quite handy for that. One thing I was a bit puzzled by is they've got rid of the button to sign out. No, they didn't, they hid it. It's in the overview section. So if you want to sign out of iCloud, you just click an overview and there's a sign out button down the bottom there, which is, I've already had to do once to fix the sidecar not working. I couldn't get the two of them to talk until I signed out of iCloud and signed back in again. Little irritations. I had the same sort of problem when I remember when they first introduced the Apple Watch unlock feature. I had to sign out and sign into everything to get it to work again. So they've given you all that stuff along the top. They've reorganised the rest of it. There's still all the stuff down the bottom. If I click on that one, which I know doesn't work, what does it do? You can't open this because, yeah, go and contact the developer for a new version. So rather than telling you it needs to relaunch, it doesn't work anymore. So that's perfectly reasonable. I haven't done a full explorer of system preferences to work out what's changed, but usually it's reasonably boring. What have they got in that? Is that going to work? Do I have to do that? There we go, yep. The notification centre on the right-hand side appears to be very similar to before. The only thing really I noticed was the loss of the Find Friends item in there, which I was previously using, but they've replaced it with the new Find My app. So Find My is the same as on the iPhone. It's the merger of Find My Friends and Find My iPhone. So you can use it to locate your people or your devices. Now, of course, this is not. Just remember, we're not capturing this because it's on the wrong computer. So I can see Shane is here. I've got Matthew's at home, and a friend of mine's up at home, and a few other things like that. So that's for people, and my devices are mostly at home or mostly here, depending on whether they're the ones I've got with me or not. So you can see.
What
Find My.
Find My.
Yep. On the iPhone in iOS 13, there was previously Find My iPhone and Find Friends as two applications. They replaced them with a single one called Find My, which has an icon that looks like where is it? Applications. Same application. So there it is. If I go to View as Icon, it'll be easier to see, and then make that bigger. Not that big. Didn't react quickly enough. There it is. So it looks like a circle with a radar sort of direction finder sort of thing on top of it. So it's the same icon on the iPhone. So that's quite handy having that available there now. The other features I mentioned, which I thought were quite handy. So photos. Let's look at photos. I was running that briefly. So Photos now has years, months, days rather than years, collections and moments. Now, did anybody understand how collections and moments worked? I had a vague idea that moments were photos you'd taken in the same location within the short period of time. Collections were photos you'd taken in the same general area over a bigger period of time, but I couldn't work out how they decided what went in what. This makes much more sense because now what you get is an icon for photos for an entire year, and it picks one. I'm not sure yet how you control which photo it picks there, but it's just picked one which I think is interesting. I think that's, then it's got a view of months, and the months view has again a year and month. I'm not too sure how did it decide on that one. If I click on that one, for example, double click it. Okay, that takes you to the months view for that particular photo, so you can still see it. If I click on that one again, it'll take me to the days photo. Now that's actually showing you not all the photos you took on that day, because I have in fact got, this was at a Catalina concert that was in Wellington, and I managed to get a photo. The band actually greeted people afterwards, and I was able to get a photo of me with Moya Brennan, which was a wonderful delight, because I wasn't expecting that. But so I handed my phone to somebody who didn't know how to operate an iPhone, and he was standing there trying to work out how to take a photo. So I actually have roughly 15 photos of me and Moya Brennan looking increasingly irritated by this person who can't work out whether he's taking a photo or not. So it's showing me only one of them. If I go to all photos, that's given me that detail view. I haven't actually worked out precisely how to navigate. If I go to all photos, it shows you there, not 15, but there you are, you can see there are lots of similar photos, so it's actually automatically cut them down to a single one, and it's only showing me one of them, probably the one it thinks is the best by whichever measure it uses.
Down to 8 photos instead of 15.
Well, I don't know how many there were, but 8 sounds more likely than well, certainly wasn't only one of them. So,
And
but
does it show you every really different photo? Or
well, at this level, I can see all the photos. She stopped smiling by the last one. And you can still go and look at the individual photos, and like that's the preview. I think that one's actually moving, so that second one's better. Yep. So it wasn't holding the phone still. So if I go back from there, so that's the all photos view, which is showing you all your photos. So you can still see them all individually, but the normal sort of days view is probably more likely where you want to be looking, and that gives you sort of highlighted photos which Apple decides which ones are the ones that are brought out big. I don't actually know if you can override it. Like if I wanted to make that the big photo, can I do something with that? Show map, no. No, doesn't seem to be obvious. I haven't had enough of a play with it yet to know if there's any obvious way of, oh well, it had video. Even has videos automatically animating on this view. So that was some Morris dancers in Nelson or something like that. So it's I quite like the way it's displayed things, because it gives you sort of pulls out some photos and shows them to you. But I'm not sure I'd be all that happy with it in permanent use, because it chooses which ones it thinks are best, not you choosing which ones you think are best.
The phone is even worse.
The phone will be doing the same thing. So basically with the same mechanism.
like an album.
Yeah. Well, obviously you still have albums, so if I go into my albums, I've still got all the photos that I have previously pulled out, like somewhere in here I've got one with all the cats that well, there's one that was one particular group of cats, and somewhere there it is, cats, a folder of albums of cats. So our previous cat, who's now passed away, I've got all the photos that I'd collected of him in that album. So that stuff's still there. So it's just the main library view is favourites, and I'm assuming it's still got all the other ones. I can probably mark many photos as favourites. I did not to use that, but it's got the people view, the places view, that sort of thing. It's taking its time to load the map because of the internet connection. Recent ones may not be all that meaningful because I haven't done much with this particular computer. Oh yeah, it's got some there.
So your iPhotos are combined in there as normal, nothing's changed?
Well, I migrated to photos many years ago, so my entire iPhoto library has stayed where it was, and I've just added more stuff to photos as I've gone along. I'm using Apple's iCloud photo library as well, so my photo collection actually lives in iCloud. I've got access to all my photos on all my devices, though for some reason it hasn't picked up my latest photo that I took recently, which was my office with all the computer screens on. But it hasn't shown up on the computer yet, so I don't know what's going on there. It may be taking its time to sync. So I haven't had a detailed look at beyond that level, but just looking at the edit features, it seems similar to what I saw before. So I haven't gone and checked to see what's new in that sort of area, but it's already had pretty good editing capabilities in Mojave, so they've retained that or improved them a bit probably in Catalina. So seems functional. I think I prefer the way they've organised it to the previous collections and moments, which didn't make a lot of sense. But I just like a bit more control over it, I think, to be happy with it. So let's have a look at the aforementioned music app. You'll notice first of all that the music app has the same icon as iTunes, or more or less. They keep changing it a little bit. I run music. I will also run, something to think about it, but if I also run activity monitor, so I can see what it's doing and watch the memory pressure. Right, just keep an eye on it. So you can see there it's lost a lot of my album covers, that is these generic ones. It was in the process of re-downloading all of my album artwork slowly while I was running it the first time. So I think what's happening is this bug causes it to, where are we? I want to look at memory. Why has this column gone really insanely wide? I can't see the memory, if that's way over there. Come on, resize, you silly thing. Thank you, that's better. Now I might actually be able to see it. It's lost track of how wide the column's supposed to be for some reason. So right, swap that around. Okay, so there's music, currently using 652 megabytes, so it's not doing very much yet. Here we go, so it's just starting up to 713 megabytes. So what I'll do is now it's at the top of the list, so it's climbing already, so it's doing it now. So if we just leave that running for a while, I'll show you what it's doing in a little bit. So functionally, music it's fine. It plays music. It does all the major features. It's still got the ability to import CDs and all that sort of stuff. They now have, as I mentioned, the songs view. They've got rid of my nice left column there with the album covers. And I've already gone to the trouble of going through and redoing all my columns more or less how I had them before. The albums view is similar to what we already had, so if I click on that one, it shows you it's actually a bit different. It goes into a new view rather than expanding in place, which is a bit disconcerting, but that's more or less giving you the same information as I had before. The main thing is it's got rid of the pop-up menu to let you pick other categories. So previously you had a menu in iTunes for music, podcasts, all those sorts of things. Those are now basically all moved out into different applications, so they're no longer as part of the music application. So how are we going on our 800? It's taking its time to build up. It's only on 850 meg. It took a good 10-15 minutes to get dangerous. So if I go into a faster internet connection, namely my phone, wait for it to appear. Come on. Personal hotspot, I want to use personal hotspot. It's not showing up, of course. No, alright, we'll just let that carry on. So you can see there the general appearance. Functionally it's all fine. I can play music. I won't bother demonstrating that particularly. I can just yeah, all that sort of stuff, and it gives you similar sort of view along the top here, and if you click on that you get a, currently without an album artwork you get the sort of mini player window and all those sorts of things, so that's all similar. It has still got, very important from my perspective, the shuffle by album mode, which is missing from the iPhone, and that means I almost never like listening to music on my iPhone, because I don't like listening to random tracks from all over my collection. I like listening to complete albums from my collection, and I don't care which order they're in, so I quite like shuffling them by album, but I can't do that on the phone, so I have to go and pick an album to listen to, so I find it irritating. But that feature is still there. How are we going here? Yeah, that graph is starting to climb now. 2.33 gigabytes, 3.05 gigabytes. Yep, it's definitely climbing now. So I'll just leave that running. So that's the first one of the new applications. The podcast application is very similar in appearance to music. So you can see they've got the same arrangement with icons down the left-hand side for various categories of things. My library, all the podcasts that I previously had seem to have survived. I did mention in the article that a friend of mine who had gone to the trouble of downloading lots and lots of episodes of things he wanted to keep, because for example things like Radio New Zealand, they only keep things for a certain amount of time. If you want a particular program and listen to it again at an indefinite point in the future, you could download it with iTunes, keep your own copy, and then go and play that later on. They have removed the ability to access your own managed library of podcasts. The only thing you can access to are your subscriptions and what's available on the server, it appears. So I very rarely use iTunes as a podcast player. I'm mostly using an app on the phone instead, not Apple's one. But the loss of the managing your own library is a nuisance. One example of that, if I run the TV app and I hold down the Option key, TV lets you, and same for music, they let you choose a library. Podcast doesn't. Podcast has its library managed for you, and you don't have any control over where it's located. So you can't move your podcast library off to a different drive, for example. It just runs. So, oh yes, that is doing something. I wonder what that's doing. Option key did do something, so that's not quite what I was expecting. Anyway, functionally it looks all right. It's got a lot of podcasts in there. The other thing I found which was a bit different is if you had any audio books, they've all migrated across to the Books application. I don't care about books in cloud, go away. So audio books, I've only got a few of them there. They're basically Douglas Adams' collection. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, etc. But they seem to be all right, apart from just losing track of where they were and things like that initially. So those are ones I've actually bought from the iTunes store. So I don't know how it works if you have audio books sourced from elsewhere. It wasn't one I did very many of. The other one relating to that is, if I find the cable I've got hanging off the end there, if you plug an iOS device in, previously that would show up in iTunes. Let that unlock. It now shows up in Finder. So if I go into Finder, you'll see on the left-hand side, at some point under Locations, we should see there it is. Something just changed. That's my other computer. It's supposed to appear in that section there, and it's not. Of course not. That would be too easy. Come on, you silly thing. Show up. It was working yesterday. Knows it's got power. But okay, so basically the view that's supposed to previously appeared in iTunes is supposed to appear in Finder, but for some reason it's decided not to actually acknowledge the existence of my iPad at the moment. So it may show up a bit later. While this is going on, oh look at that graph! Notice a distinct trend now, and it's up to 6 gigabytes. So the music application downloading all these album covers is chewing through memory without any obvious limit. So yes, fun. Now the security features. There it is. It's finally shown up. Locations. You can see there on the left-hand side. If I click that, you now get. I've got to trust. That's new. trust this device. Yes, do that. And once you've done that, you'll get a view which is now in Finder, but it looks the same as how iTunes used to present that information as well. So your device management stuff, if you were previously using iTunes, is all there still. It's just in Finder now. It's thinking about it still, but it will get there eventually. Oh, there we go. Anybody not seeing the orange section of memory pressure? We're getting there now. 7 gigabytes and counting. That's still loading, so I'll let that carry on. Now, what I wanted to demonstrate was the increased security feature. If I go into something that I know, I may have trouble demonstrating this. Okay. That's the message you get if you have a application which is signed by the developer, but has not been notarized by Apple, which means that Apple has checked it for malicious software and added an additional signature. That's one I noticed after I'd done my clone, so I've actually downloaded a new version. There is a software update built into this application. Because I can't launch the application, I can't use its updater to get the new version, so I'd have to go to the website and manually download it. So this is the reason I recommend you check that all your applications are up to date before you upgrade to Catalina, because if you do it afterwards and you find one of these, you may have to then go and hunt down the website without having any way of running the application to check. So that's the sort of problem you can run into. Let me just see what else, if anything else triggers one of these warnings. That one didn't. There's an example of an application that's 32-bit and won't run. Snitch is okay, Keynote. There's quite a few of those. I've got older versions of some development tools and things. New version of Keynote should be all right. Like, I'm trying to think of an example of an application that tries to just randomly look at files in certain locations. Daisy disk might be an example. Daisy disk. What's that do? I think I've already granted it full disk access. That's just my security software, so that's not an issue. No, that's not one. I'll just show you what I'm talking about anyway. There is a new section in System Preferences, Security and Privacy, under Privacy. Apple keeps adding more categories to this list. In a recent version, they added this thing called full disk access, which you can use to allow applications, basically grant them permission to access anything on your computer. They've now added a new one under Files and Folders, and you can see here I've got a few applications that it actually tells you which ones have been granted full disk access, and it also has for some of them whether they're allowed to access certain folders. So VMware Fusion, for example, is one that I've granted access to go into my Documents folder, and one of them that just appeared while I was running something before, I think. No, I can't see it there now. But if you run an application and the application tries to access your Documents folder, your desktop folder, or a few other critical places, you'll get a pop-up message saying this application would like to access this folder, do you want to allow it? And you say allow, it will automatically add it to this list, and then you can go ahead. If you don't think it should be doing that, you can deny it, and then it will not be able to access whichever folder it is. So that could be quite handy if you have something which has a somewhat dubious purpose and a Trojan horse sort of thing where it pretends to be something useful but is actually going and scanning all your documents and sending information off somewhere. And you didn't expect it to be doing that. So why is this application wanting to access my Documents folder? So you can actually choose whether or not to block individual applications either after the fact or at the first time they try and do it. So that's quite handy. I like that sort of level of control. The difficulty is that the first time I ran most of my applications, I got bombarded with, do you want this application to allow you to do this? Yes, yeah, oh, there's another one, yes, yes, yeah. And I had about 15 of them to get through the first time I ran Catalina. A similar one that happened was, in the right-hand side, you've got notifications that can pop up in the corner of the screen in recent operating systems. Every application that wants to send notifications, you've got to grant it permission. So I got this column from the top of the screen to the bottom of the screen saying, I'd like to send notifications. Yes, 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 yes. It was like about 15 of them. It was like ludicrous. It was so it's you, and unfortunately, you should pay attention to them, because if you don't pay attention, you may accidentally grant something that you didn't intend to. So you've got to actually be aware of what it's saying. So, but that's sort of a temporary annoyance rather than an ongoing problem. If I happen to install a new application and it does the same thing, it will ask the same question, but otherwise. And that's where you go to adjust all these settings. Some things in recent versions like Mojave have needed access to the microphone, for example. That's where they get added in there. Now, one I've mentioned that was a problem was Audacity. Now, Audacity, that's all right, it's been downloaded from the internet, I expected that, actually runs, but has no access to the microphone, which means you can use it possibly to edit audio files, you can't use it to record anything. And it appears that this is a permissions problem, that they're not triggering the mechanism which allows Apple to ask permission to use this application to use the microphone. So they're not doing whatever's required to get to that point. The developers have, well, it cannot access audio input at all. The developers had a page, which I don't have open on this computer, Audacity team, which said, they warned about it, does not support Audacity, or Catalina does not support Audacity 232. They have a read more page which explains you can work around it by running terminal and typing in that command to run Audacity, which then lets it access the microphone. Basically, you're bypassing the normal security mechanisms by doing that. But you have to leave terminal running, you have to leave the terminal window open, so it's not exactly pretty. So that's the sort of thing you might run into if an application is not fully updated for Catalina. So unfortunately, it looks like, based on the timeline, if I go back to the front page, they released this version of Audacity in May and they haven't fixed it yet. So this is now, what, 6 months later, 5 months later? Yeah, that's irritating. The easiest solution in that sort of case, if you really need the microphone input capability, would be to find a commercial program that's not too expensive and use that instead. That's probably the best solution. Now, Approve with Apple Watch, I actually managed to get working after I wrote my article, if I can find something. If I go into System Preferences, it's going to work for me this time, and I go into, say, Security and Privacy, and I unlock it. It asks you for your password. Oh, so now that I've got the feature working, my Apple Watch should, and it's not. No, it gave up. Okay, it actually knows that the feature's there, but it's not working reliably. So I can unlock the normal way, but if you've got an Apple Watch running watchOS 6, it can unlock most of those security prompts on the computer. So anything which is asking you for your password on the computer, you can unlock it with your Apple Watch just by double clicking a button. So that's relying on the watch already being unlocked and on your wrist, so you've already typed in your passcode on the watch previously to get it into that state. They already had the ability to log into the computer using that, so they've added these extra features now. So that's a nice one to have if you happen to have an Apple Watch.
Where are your passwords? You know, if you say them.
They're either in Keychain Access or in Safari if you use Safari. If you use Chrome or Firefox, they've got their own methods of storing passwords which are separate. The Keychain Access has a monstrously long list of everything that it's got saved for me, which you can go in and individually look at. That particular application does not support the Apple Watch unlock method, and I'm not sure that's deliberate or just Apple hasn't got around to it yet. So I have to sort of type in my password. So if I come into here and find, go back to the top again, find something, well, there's an example. I have an old AIM account. If I double click that one, which is no longer valid, if I click show password, it asks me for a password, which is my computer password. If I type that in now, it will reveal the password that I used on that particular AIM account. That's been there ever since macOS 10 was introduced, so it hasn't really changed at all. So I won't bother with that at the moment because I don't want to show everybody my passwords.
Annoying because you've got to put your password in for each one.
Yeah.
As you do it.
Yeah. There's actually a better way if you're only concerned about web page passwords, in Safari, preferences, passwords, I've got to type in my password to unlock it, and this initially hides them unless I click on them, so I won't click on anything. But that has a list of all the websites, and all you have to do is click on each line and it reveals the password in the password column. So that's an easier way just for the website passwords. It doesn't cover email or other things like Wi-Fi passwords. But that's under Safari.
So you don't need both systems, you have one of Safari or Key.
Well, they're actually the same system. It's just a different way of displaying the same information. Safari is giving you an easier way to access those passwords that are stored in the keychain. And if you're syncing your passwords between devices using Apple's iCloud keychain, that's all synced to your iPhone and iPad as well. So, and the iPhone and iPad have also got a way of accessing website passwords. If you go into refresh my memory, settings. There's a section under settings called passwords and accounts. And in passwords and accounts, there's a website and app passwords. And if you go into that, it authenticates, and then you can see your list of everything that has a website or an app password saved, and you can see it on there in the same way. That's referring to the same list that Safari's using if you've synced them.
Feel it's secure?
Well, it requires your passcode or your Face ID or Touch ID to access it. So yes, I do. If somebody stole my phone, they'd have to either have my fingerprint on my face, or in this case my face, or guess my device passcode in few enough attempts that it didn't lock the phone permanently. So I'm not concerned about that.
When does the fingerprint one first start?
iPhone 5S, I think, from memory, which was 2013, was the first model that had the Touch ID sensor. Carried on for the iPhone 6, 6S, 7 and 8. Then the 10 is the first one that had Face ID, which was at the same time as the same year as the 8. So we're now on the third generation of iPhones with Face ID. iPhone 10, 10S, 10R and Max, and 11 and 11 Pro and 11 Pro Max have all got Face ID. Both of which are optional, by the way. You don't have to use Touch ID or Face ID if you don't think you trust the mechanism.
But if you had to take your iPhone or laptop in to be serviced, how do you feel secure with your passwords? Because they need to get in.
They have to get into them, so you have to trust them. There's no alternative. Like if your computer won't boot, you need to give them, if they can get it as far as getting a login prompt, they need to be able to log in, so you have to give them your password. If you are able to plan ahead, what I have done in the past is I've changed my password temporarily to an easy one, given them the computer to work on, and then I change it back again afterwards.
And they've still got access.
They got access to my computer while I got it, but we haven't got any alternative. We have to trust them. If it's something I can actually physically remove all my data from it first and give it to them, I might do that.
But what about using a different app like LastPass or something?
Yeah, that's one way around it. You can, if you just have most of your passwords stored in LastPass or 1Password or something like that, then you don't give them the access code for that. So they still have access to everything else. They can, of course, then copy your vault, but it's secure with your passwords, so it's impossible to get into it without knowing what your password is. Yeah. Right. So probably not much longer. So there are. I've barely scratched the surface in terms of Catalina features. Apple has a web page, which I'll just dig up here. apple.com/nz macOS Catalina features. That's the one, which has a list of all the new features in Catalina. And I've shown you about 3 of them. Or something. There's an awful lot of stuff in there. And like I've been listening to all the podcasts and on some of the major podcasts of Apple technical people and things like that, not from Apple, but commentators and so on. And most of them are look. We'll tell you about this a little bit. We're going to spread out all the other information about it over the next several months because they just can't. There's just too much stuff there. So.
Any significance in going to an NZ page, David?
Only that it will not show you features that Apple you can't use in New Zealand. So, for example, the US page might advertise features to do with the the HomePod or something like that, which is not available in New Zealand, or the Apple Watch US pages tell you all about the materials and cellular features which are not available in New Zealand, and that sort of thing. And the Apple TV does not have Siri in New Zealand, so the Apple TV page in New Zealand is missing that sort of information. So going to the New Zealand page just gives us a less misleading view of what software is actually capable of in its current state. So I tend to...
That's basically what I did with iOS 13 and iPadOS 13. I actually copied and pasted that into a text editor document, and one of the guys wanted to copy it, so I just...
Yeah, well, it's available on Apple's webpage, so... I've shown you briefly what the podcast and the music app looks like. Speaking of which, how are we going? 18 gigabytes of memory. It's still orange.
Did your iPad load up into the front window? Did you actually show them after it loaded in?
Sorry?
I think it was still trying
Yeah, it did.
to...
Yep.
It did?
Yep. It showed up. The actual content of the window hadn't appeared yet. There it is, right. So once it finally shows up, it looks just like iTunes did in terms of things like updating, restoring, managing backups, and it's got categories in there for syncing information, most of which I can't use because I'm using iCloud features, but like TV shows, podcasts, audio books.
Can you sync your music?
Yep. If you're not using, I'm using iCloud Music Library, so I can't. But if I wasn't using that feature, I would still be able to sync music from my music library manually or automatically to my. Yeah. So because I've got iCloud Music Library, I've got access to my entire music library via iCloud basically on all my devices. I'm paying Apple
So
what?
you don't need to sync it anyway.
No. I'm paying Apple $40 a year or something for that privilege. It's a feature called iTunes Match, which is quite handy. So yep.
Just progress while we're here, and then if you turn off the computer and you go home, next time you open it, it just carries on from where it
The music you're talking about, the
download
Yeah.
is going on here.
That-
You can stop it any time
Yep.
you resume.
Yep, so if I quit music, that will suddenly revert to normal. In fact, I'll do that now, just to show you. If I quit music, it'll take a moment to react, but once music goes away, it's up to 19 gigabytes. Then music's gone, and then the memory suddenly will drop back from orange to green again. So it's a temporary problem, and I think what it's doing, as it loads album artwork, it's just keeping them more memory or something like that. It's reasonably simple. There it goes, it's gone green again. So back to normal.
Dropping out now.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's green.
Yep, so you can see the green, so that's showing a history timeline over there. So orange will peel away and will get more green over time. So, yep, so it's just, as I said, that's a temporary bug, but that sort of annoyance, and there's going to be other ones all over the place that I haven't found, but that's just one which a friend of mine immediately told me about, and I observed it on my own machine, so I thought I'd just leave that as an example. Read that bug article again. Capital Apple is quite enlightening.
I'm just surprised when I just downloaded all the photos I took while I was away, and
Yeah.
there were a lot.
Yeah.
I had 2 tours, one after the other. And I was surprised it only took a few minutes. I mean, with that, and suddenly it was all there. So, I mean, those are pictures, so why the heck is it taking so long?
Yep.
I suppose it has to access them, it's not just hand them on the plate.
So just to wrap things up for tonight, I've given you a brief look at Catalina. You can see it's a bit clunky at the moment. Not just that potentially killing your Mac bug, but a few of the other things got bugs. So definitely not. I wouldn't recommend rushing into it, even if there wasn't a safety concern. But in terms of older operating systems, I've mentioned that in my article, but just to re-emphasise that, if you're running High Sierra, you've got most of a year left before you run out of security updates. If you're running Mojave, you've got about 2 years left of security updates. So don't feel you have to rush into Catalina, even though Apple keeps trying to push it at you with that silly system preferences thing. If you're still running Sierra or earlier, if possible, I would recommend upgrading to a later version because they're no longer getting security updates in Sierra. Having said that, I'm running Sierra on my leftover software Mac Mini, but I don't tend to use it for internet stuff. I'm not using it for email, I'm not using it for web browsing much, so I'm not worried about that. It's mostly there so I can run older software and keep them working. So I'm not concerned about which OS I run on that machine. Sierra just happened to be the easiest one for me to run because everything I needed to run ran on that version, but didn't quite on the next version after that. But if your spare machine is a 27-inch iMac, for example, that's not quite so practical. If you want to have two of them, it's a bit bigger. Mac Minis. If I could show you the photo, which I'd like to show you the photo, but it hadn't synced. I don't really want to dig out the adapters and things, but I took a photo of my desk roughly at the time I was testing Catalina. I had screen there, iPad there, running Sidecar. I was running my laptop in the middle of it all, and the Mac Mini was around behind the laptop, so that was running the hard drive hanging off it and everything. And I've got more Mac Minis running different operating systems, so I have quite a collection at the moment, all running different things. Yeah. Okay. Any last questions at this point?